to in dark places, like a good neighbor, I guess. So I've been known to kind of whine around about how me and Jimmy have the most insane work schedules known to man, and it's hard for us to get together and record stuff. So insider information, Jimmy records stuff every week and sends to me, and then I edit it all together and put it together for the show in a nice little package. I usually spend anywhere from 20 to 1,000 hours a week editing these shows. When I was working on episode 46 a couple weeks ago, I took a little nap after I got done editing the show and recording Jimmy's parts onto the show and stuff. That inspired me to have a dream about Jimmy. We were at some kind of little bar that had a lighthouse next to it, and someone called us to fix something at the lighthouse. Probably a light bulb or something like that. Whatever it was, we saved the day, and we went to that little bar after we got done and recorded a show. And then I had another dream about Jimmy whenever I was working on episode 47. I can't remember anything at all about that dream, but right as my alarm clock was going off that morning, I could hear Jimmy saying, "It's a hanging Wesley! It's a hanging Wesley! It's a hanging Wesley! Wesley!" And that's the only thing I remember about that dream. It's a hanging Wesley. Does anyone out there know what in the world a hanging Wesley is? I woke up thinking, what in the world is a hanging Wesley? So I typed it in on my phone to look it up to see if it was an actual thing, and I don't guess it was. So maybe you listeners can play along at home. What is a hanging Wesley? It seemed pretty exciting to me in the dream. It was kind of like you were bowling and you got a strike. You were like, "It's a hanging Wesley!" We just had the Super Bowl, and people tend to watch that kind of stuff. I don't. But maybe that is something that was like from a football game or something. It's a hanging Wesley! Okay, that's enough of that. Here's what's happening in the news this week. And Mr. Haunted is going to be kicking things off for us this week. Look, there he is.
Some of these details may be disturbing to some listeners. So this story is out of Providence, Rhode Island. Investigators are calling this a bizarre and extremely concerning crime. The discovery of decapitated chickens in apparent cultural or religious sacrificial sites across Rhode Island. One of the dead chickens was found wearing a woman's dress. "We've never seen anything like this," explained Earl Newman, one of the investigators for the group. Newman said he was first assigned this case about 2 years ago when officials got word of a site in Warwick. Since then, nearly a dozen sites with about 40 dead chickens have been found in cities and towns across the state from North Kingston to Cumberland. The agency says they've been in touch with a special agent from New York City Police Department who specializes in ritual sacrifices. Due to the bizarre circumstances of these sites in Rhode Island, Newman explains what some of the various sites look like when officials arrive on the scene. We found some other material in the vicinity, grain and some colored cloth that may signify some sort of religious practice. On Thursday, investigators receiving a new tip that led them to an undisclosed location where they found what appears to be a cow leg nailed to a tree with candles surrounding it. Before Thursday, these sites have only had chickens or small birds. Special agent officials said it was important to note the slaughtered animals are not consistent with what is protected under the United States law of humane slaughtering for various religious and cultural rituals. Therefore, this is a federal crime. The Humane Society of the United States has offered a $5,000 reward to anyone who has information that could lead officials to the person or persons responsible for these crimes. This is a developing story.
Woman who wants to marry a ghost says they're arguing over the wedding date. By Edian O'Connell. Thanks, Edian. Brocarde, 38, is a singer-songwriter from Oxfordshire, and she fell in love with Eduardo, who she says is the ghost of a Victorian soldier last year. Eduardo appeared in her home, and they have been together since. Like all couples, they have times of tension, but for the most part, they are extremely happy. Eduardo and I are currently arguing over the wedding date, said Brocardi. I want a summer wedding date, but he hates the heat, and I'd secretly love to make him melt, but he disappears often enough as it is. Brocardi and Eduardo communicate through unusual means. The ghost often sends cryptic messages in the shower. Eduardo leaves subliminal messages in the shower and shows his emotions by sending hot and cold sensations through my body, she explains. Marrying a ghost is proving to be a difficult task. The couple have been shunned from numerous churches because the institutions see the relationship as blasphemous. Finding the venue is proving really tricky, she notes. We've been kicked out of a few churches and have been threatened with exorcism already. I want a huge white wedding, but a lot of people just can't see the vision. Brocardi claims that some priests do believe in the paranormal, but they can't publicly speak out about these beliefs. I refuse to consider any of the typical rules and boundaries, as this isn't a typical romance, she adds. Choosing who to invite in the nuptials is also causing a hassle, as most of Eduardo's friends are no longer alive. To add a notch of glitz and glamour to the occasion, the couple are inviting a series of celebrities, including the ghosts of Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, and the Bard. The A-list guest list also includes King Henry VIII and Johnny Cash. Eduardo proposed to Brocardi in November 2021 when she found a diamond ring on her pillow after the pair had a fight. She claims the mysterious piece of jewelry was a romantic proposal and said yes to her spirit lover. And now here is your Nicolas Cage meltdown of the week. Wow, poor guy. Hey, you know what? Last month we took a little road trip into the unknown of the state of Illinois. And this week we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to take a road trip into the unknown of the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island is the smallest state in the United States. It was admitted to the Union on May 29, 1790. It was the 13th state of the Union.
Newport, Rhode Island is famous for miles of enchanting coastline, awe-inspiring architecture, the shopping scene, not to mention our fair share of history, 381 years to be exact. But truth be told, you don't get to be this old without a few skeletons in your closet. These spooky spots in and around Newport are said to have a haunted past. Okay, Junebug, pull right into the parking lot here. This is the White Horse Tavern. You know what? Everybody get out of the bus for a little bit. Stretch your legs while I tell this story. This building right here, the White Horse Tavern, is the oldest and supposedly most haunted tavern in America. The White Horse Tavern opened in 1673, at which point it served as a courthouse, a meeting place for colonists, British soldiers, pirates, sailors, and founding fathers, and lastly, a private residence. According to legend and some eyewitness tavern employees, several ghosts still occupy the tavern, with accounts of being tapped on the shoulder and footsteps overhead from nearby empty rooms reported often. Spirits are said to include an elderly man in colonial garb, a seaman who previously died on the premises. Of course he previously died, he can't futurely died. And a female reported floating above one of the dining tables. Purgatory Chasm. The 160-foot long cliff overlooking Second Beach in Middletown is rumored to be haunted, dating back to the 1600s. Legend believes there once was a Native American man chasing a young woman supposed to be the object of his affection. As they reached Purgatory Chasm, she leapt across to the other side, while he unfortunately fell to his death. Legend believes his ghost is still trapped there, searching for the woman. Belcourt of Newport. The 60-room Louis VIII style estate on Bellevue Avenue has a long reputation of being haunted. It was purchased by the Tinney family in 1956, pick up sticks, who used the estate to showcase their expensive art and antiques collection. On July 18, 1957, Belcourt opened its doors to the public for guided tours of the museum. One night, Harley Tinney awoke to find a man standing beside the bed wearing a long brown robe and a hat that covered his face. Moments later, the figure walked through the wall and disappeared. Years later, when the family was remodeling the same room, they discovered there used to be a doorway where the robed figure previously exited. Harley also recounts another haunted encounter. No one was home, so I thought it was strange that the lights were on in the ballroom. Being naturally conservative and not wanting to burn the electricity unnecessarily, I went through the ballroom to turn out the lights. After I had turned off the switch, there was very little light left. As I passed the front of the armor, something screamed at me. It was a horrible and loud roaring sound. Then the lights went back on, and I turned them off again, and the armor screamed. When it screamed a third time, I ran as fast as I could from the room. The scream was terrifying. It sounded like someone being killed. All right. Our driver, Junebug, is now turning into this parking lot where you may see the Carey Mansion. Fans of the 1960s television series Dark Shadows would most likely recognize this French Renaissance chateau located on Newport's Ruggles Avenue. Used for all the external shots of the TV series Collins Mansion, Carey Mansion has a bit of haunted history of its own. Edson Bradley built the mansion, originally known as Seaview Terrace, in 1907 in Washington, D.C. In the 1920s, Bradley relocated himself and his family to Rhode Island, and along with them came Seaview Terrace, dismantled into pieces and then rebuilt on Ruggles Avenue. In 1929, Julia Bradley, Edson Bradley's wife, died. Bradley held her funeral at the chapel located within the mansion. 5 years later, Edson himself passed away. Another year later, the mansion became an exclusive all-girls summer boarding school renamed Burnham by the Sea, where occurrences of smoke detectors going off for no reason, bottles flying off desks, and radios turning on and off by themselves were often reported. It's believed that Bradley's late wife, Julia, felt such a great attachment to the house that she refused to leave even after her death. And let's say one last stop here in Newport. Colt State Park in Bristol originally operated as a farm until it was sold to the state. Prior to being sold, it was believed that a stable hand died in the barn. To this day, staff of the park shut off lights and closed doors only to find them on or open when they returned a few hours later. One visitor reported walking to his car in an area referred to as Suicide Hill when he saw two little girls walking up the path towards him who vanished as he got closer. A staff worker similarly confirmed that he has seen and heard the same girls giggling in the woods near that area. According to many, 2 young sisters drowned in the waters in the 1970s.
The Foster Witch. The northern town of Foster is home to one of the state's most popular urban legends. Dolly Ellen Cole was a natural healer and suspected witch living in the area during the 1800s. The townspeople set out against her and attempted to burn her alive through setting her house ablaze. While Dolly wasn't home, sadly her daughter was inside the home and perished in the fire. Dolly cursed the town and vowed revenge. Sightings of her ghost still appear throughout Foster. Her case is often confused with that of Dorothy Cole, a woman who was mysteriously murdered nearby during this same time period. Their two tales have often been combined into one chilling urban legend. New England Vampire Panic. The New England Vampire Panic is a well-documented period of history fueled entirely by urban legend and fear. Rhode Island was at the center of this series of unfortunate events, consisting of the exhumation of corpses and burning of internal organs. The myth at the time was that tuberculosis was caused by the dead consuming the life of their surviving family members. The people of this time period thought the only way to stop the disease was to dig up the dead and burn their hearts to halt the vampire activity. Rhode Island is not a huge hotspot for UFO activity, but I found this sighting from June 11th, 2020 in Westerly, Rhode Island. I was sitting in my living room, I looked out my window and saw a cross-looking UFO with rainbow lights, and the craft itself was black and small, at least from my distance. I saw it again a block away and have only seen it at night. I believe that the possible aliens that are inside that thing know who I am, because about 4 months ago I took a vacation to Florida and I saw it again in the air at night. Each sighting looked the same, and just 3 or 4 weeks ago I was sitting in my chair outside at dawn, and when it turned dark I saw something moving in the sky and it looked exactly like a star. It wasn't a plane, which is what I thought it was at first, but this one had the same lights as a star and was identical to a star, but didn't have rainbow lights. The first UFO I had mentioned might have been a drone, but I don't think so, since it followed me to Florida and also to a block away from my house. I just looked at the picture/video of mine that I remember catching it on camera in, and right where it was nothing. Like the aliens erased themselves from my photo. I think the aliens know me.
Our next stop on our haunted field trip, hop into the In Dark Places bus, and we're going to visit Exeter, Rhode Island. The Mercy Brown vampire incident occurred in Rhode Island in 1892. It is one of the best documented cases of the exhumation of a corpse in order to perform rituals to banish an undead manifestation. The incident was part of the wider New England vampire panic. George and Mary Brown lived in Exeter, Rhode Island in the late 1800s with their 3 children. They had 2 daughters, Mary and Mercy, and a son named Edwin. Within a span of a few years, the mother passed away, then their daughter Mary, and lastly, 19-year-old Mercy died in January of 1892. 2 months after Mercy's death, Edwin became very ill. By the way, this was during the vampire panic that was throughout New England at the time, and it was suggested to George that one of his deceased family members could in fact be a vampire that is causing Edwin's illness and the other deaths in the family. They believed the vampire would take blood while the victims were asleep, causing them extreme fatigue and weight loss. We now know the illness was tuberculosis, but one night, armed with torches and shovels, a group, including a medical examiner, headed to the cemetery where the family members were buried. They discovered that while Edwin's mother and sister, Mary, were withered skeletons, Mercy's body was intact with no signs of decomposition, and upon examining Mercy's organs, they discovered that her heart was still wet with blood even after 2 months after her death. They concluded, of course, Mercy was a vampire. They believed that if they burned Mercy's heart and mixed the ashes into a potion, it would make a great antidote for Edwin's sickness. There are also reports that Mercy was beheaded and her arms and legs were severed so she would never be able to roam and hurt anyone again. Her heart was buried on a rock near the gravestone, and the potion was given to poor Edwin, who soon died there soon afterwards. It didn't work. It is believed now that Mercy's body was not decomposed because she was buried in winter, and some say she was still in an above-ground crypt, waiting to be buried when the ground thawed. Witnesses report hearing a young girl weeping near her grave and strange blue lights that have been seen hovering over her gravestone. Some say because of the extreme violation of Mercy's body, she still haunts the cemetery where she is buried, which is located behind Chestnut Hill Baptist Church in Exeter, Rhode Island.
Palatine. This Rhode Island urban legend is specific to Block Island. It is said that in the 1700s, a passenger ship called the Palatine was stranded at sea during a storm. In one version of the tale, the ship was taken over by pirates who held the passengers captive and murdered the crew. Another version involves a mutiny by the crew who murdered the captain and imprisoned the passengers. In both versions, the passengers ended up on an abandoned ship that eventually crashed on Block Island. While most of them were rescued and relatively unharmed, one woman was accidentally left on the ship. The people of the town burned the ship to avoid other boats getting caught up in the debris, and the cries from the remaining passengers were heard as the fire blazed. It is said the ghost of the woman is still spotted, and the image of the burning ship appears each year. Stormalong and the Giant Octopus. It's unclear when this very old urban legend was first told, but there is much evidence that it began in Rhode Island. The story involves a ship sailing through the deepest part of the Atlantic when the anchor was knocked loose into the depths of the sea. After failed attempts to pull the anchor and continue on their journey, the great captain, Stormalong, plunged into the ocean. Several moments later, he emerged after successfully arm wrestling the giant octopus that was playing a prank on them. The anchor was brought back in, and the octopus was left in knots at the bottom of the ocean. Poor guy.
Our next stop in haunted Rhode Island is Newport Beach Hotel and Suites. There are a number of ghosts that inhabit this historic side of the hotel. There's a little girl ghost. When there are a large amount of children staying in the hotel, a small girl wearing a bright blue dress and gold shoes can be seen running and laughing in the hallways. You can try your best to follow her, but she runs quickly around corners before vanishing. How about the man in the top hat? There is a dark-skinned man that has been seen in a few different situations. A bartender would sometimes see the man peek around the corner at the back of the bar. The man looks like he's trying to get the bartender's attention without being seen by the others in the bar. As the bartender would walk towards him, he would duck behind the corner and disappear. The same man has been seen dancing with a female in one of the ballrooms. No music is playing, but you can see these two spin each other around until you look away. An overnight security guard has received numerous phone calls of an oddly dressed man crying uncomfortably in the rear function room with the lights off. When the situation is investigated, you can clearly see the man sitting in a chair, crying into his hands. Oh, that's not enough ghosts for the Newport Beach Hotel? How about the prostitute ghost? In the annex units, which were part of the brothel before the original structure was destroyed by a terrible hurricane, complaints of the closet door rattling like someone is pounding from the inside trying to get out happens fairly often. There is no cause for this happening, but maintenance typically tells guests that it's the vibration from the air conditioning system outside. Of course it is. Are there more ghosts in this hotel? Why, yes. Maintenance shop prankster. Tools are constantly going missing in the maintenance office. Sometimes tools will be gone for days, or just long enough to annoy you. The tools always return to the exact location that it went missing. And that does it for... Oh no! There's a kitchen poltergeist. This is a nasty little ghost that the staff refers to as Jester. Jester seems to be a menace. Plates of food have flown off the cooking stations, pots and pans slamming together in the middle of the night, while simultaneously turning on all the faucets. Sounds like any night at my house. During the overnight shifts, he can be heard banging on the ductwork while deeply laughing into the vents. There has been one occurrence where Jester was taunted by a friend of someone covering the desk. As she leaned back into the desk chair, claiming that this place was not scary, she was pushed forward and received 3 scratches on her back. The 2 of them were then drawn into the lobby, where they kept hearing people talking at the front desk. They could hear whistling coming up the rear hallway by the kitchen. The tune was getting closer to the lobby, but when the whistler should have reached the lobby, the tune would continue into the bar and through the back ballrooms, as if the spirit were circling them. This place has been underestimated over the years and should be a nice place for a ghost hunter to investigate. I've never heard of it. It sounds fun. And that is called the Newport Beach Hotel and Suites.
Fingernail Freddy. The terrifying cinematic character known as Freddy Krueger is thought to have been inspired by creepy campfire tales in Rhode Island. The stories of Fingernails Freddy, a violent man living in the woods with long fingernails, date back to the 19th century. The story says anyone who wanders into his former property in the woods is murdered. There is some speculation that Fingernails Freddy is actually a man who lost his family when neighborhood children set their home on fire. His face was burned as a result, and he turned to the woods, but vowed revenge on the town. Apparently, if campers were being too loud, Freddy would say, "Don't make noise at night because Fingernail Freddy is going to come and claw you with his nails." This is from the Narragansett Weekly, November 1860. Going back there. Thanks, Narragansett. During the Revolutionary War, Hannah Markson and Comfort Cottrell, two girls then staying at the house of Esquire Clark of Westerly, were trying their fortunes and endeavoring to bring their bows by throwing each her ball of yarn into the well and winding them off while they severally repeated a verse from the scriptures backward. They completed their charm about dusk and went to the front of the house, and were there standing, awaiting the arrival of their sweethearts, or the result of their incantations. They both saw a monster figure coming up the road. It was some 8 or 10 feet high, and marched with a stately step, but with eyes, as they said, as big as saucers, and breathing flames from its distended jaws. They saw it turn from the street and approach the house. In consternation, they fled frantically. Esquire Clark, who was a piteous man and not easily frightened, came in at the back door the moment the monster had mounted the front doorstep, and was glaring steadily into the house through the panes of glass over the front door. The steady, unmistakable gaze of the demon, for such they believed him to be, convinced Mr. Clark at once that spiritual weapons were alone adequate to combat such an adversary. He immediately went into prayer, and the devil meantime left, never again reappearing to trouble the good man's house or terror-stricken girls. Both became serious. One or both of them soon after found relief in a strictly religious life.
Hi, individuals. This story is about a haunted carousel. Crescent Park, located in East Providence, in the Riverside section, was once known as the Coney Island of New England. People from all over would come to enjoy the games and rides at this amusement park, which first opened in 1886. The Crescent's goal was to provide family fun, but despite this, many felt this park actually had a very dark and sinister atmosphere. One modern-day visitor to the park described how he felt by comparing it to the atmosphere that Ray Bradbury achieved in one of his popular stories. In his book, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Bradbury has 2 young boys late one night in an amusement park being pursued by an unseen evil presence. The visitor stated that this is how Crescent Park made him feel. For years, Crescent Park's main attraction was the Loof Carousel. Charles Loof built this ride in 1895. The carousel has 4 chariots and 62 wooden horses. It also features a classic large mechanized organ, but many find its calliope music very creepy. The demise of Crescent Park started when its ballroom burnt down in the 1960s. To the chagrin of some, when the majority of the park closed down for good in 1979, a group of concerned citizens saved the merry-go-round and its creepy music from destruction. The National Park Service designated this carousel a National Historic Landmark, and it has been fully restored. Visitors can still ride it for less than $1. But it appears some of the dark atmosphere still lingers. Since the amusement park's closing, the carousel is run on a set schedule, but when many witnesses have reported seeing the carousel's lights turn on and hearing its machinery start when the park is locked up and the building the carousel is housed in is closed for the night. They report hearing that the calliope music they heard was the most disturbing part of the experience. These witnesses also report seeing an apparition of a young woman During the time, this carousel came alive of its own volition. They all state this woman looked sad and she stared into the lake at the park. No one seems to know the origin of this particular ghost. Charles Loof was the creator of this carousel ride. He was known for his carved horses. Today they sell from $6,000 to $20,000 apiece. The carousel at Coney Island is one of his creations as well. And there's the story about Rhode Island's haunted carousel.
Rhode Island might be the smallest state, but they do have Sasquatches up there. Here's a report from October 15th, 1998 in Glendale, Rhode Island. I was training for a mountain bike race, and this was to be my last ride prior to the race. I was riding at the Black Hut Management Area in Glendale, Rhode Island. Along for the ride was my 3-year-old mixed breed Shepherd Lab large dog. It was sunny but cool. I planned to spend an hour or so breaking a sweat. As I weaved my way through the trails, I had to leash my dog across a street. After I unhooked him, we started up a hill toward a chasm. It's small and kids hang around there and drink beer and have fires, etc. At the crest of the hill, I could see the top of the chasm about 50 yards away. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something that first appeared to be a dirty white blanket, perhaps hung on a small tree. And suddenly, I think it heard us. It turned as it was squatting with its back to me. It saw me, stood up, and disappeared into the woods. I was shocked and I could not believe what I had just saw. From my vantage point, I would say the animal was white or gray, but very dirty. In no way did it resemble a man. I did not see the face clearly, but from what I did see, it stood fully erect. Its gait and posture was like an ape. The arms were not long like a gorilla, and oddly, it was near 7 feet tall. I'd estimate maybe 6 feet at best. I reversed my direction and rode immediately to the top of the chasm. I looked for footprints and hair, but didn't find any. I walked a short distance in the woods in the direction where it disappeared. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. I knew it was nowhere in the general area because my dog was not barking. Anytime there's an animal near, a fox, a coyote, a deer, my dog barks and will usually chase. Interesting point is that my dog never barked, and I don't think he saw or heard or smelled it. I noticed no unusual smell in the area, and also noted no signs of broken branches and no way to determine its direction.
This place doesn't seem haunted. It's just a road. However, this mysterious Rhode Island road you absolutely must drive at least once. Rhode Island is one of America's oldest states, and with that honor comes a rich history loaded with folklore and creepy tales. The state is home to haunted hotels, haunted mansions, spooky cemeteries, and even, it seems, a haunted road. There's no denying that this one road in Cumberland has quite a bit of reported paranormal activity. Cumberland is a small town located on the Massachusetts border with roots dating back to 1635. It's safe to say this spot has a lot of history. Cumberland actually has several spots that are rumored to be haunted. The old monastery and the local public library are both known for their rumored paranormal activity. However, the spookiest tales seem to be from drivers who have taken Tower Hill Road. This narrow road, which is mostly forested, is situated between Diamond Hill Road and Rentham Road, leading to Diamond Hill Park. The list of reported paranormal and unexplainable activity here is quite long. People have spotted the spirits of young children standing on the side of the road, unexplained lights and sounds, and even some zombies. The creepiest tale, though, implies that a Bigfoot-like creature locals call the man-monkey roams this road. More than a few Rhode Islanders have sworn that they have seen this creepy creature on this long, winding road. And while this certainly could be people's imaginations playing tricks on them, the similarities in the accounts of the creature are pretty alarming. Of course, it's impossible to say whether or not this road is actually haunted, and how many of these accounts are mistakes or exaggerations. Still, considering these reports from locals have been happening for decades, it's safe to say there might be something to these claims. We recommend all visitors drive this road at least once, preferably at night, to decide for themselves.
The devil has made visits to Rhode Island, leaving footprints on a ledge of rock on the west side of the highway leading from Wickford to East Greenwich, where the railroad from Davisville to Quonset crosses it. Whatever the mission, he had his dog with him, and both were so hot that they left their marks in the hard granite. Higher on the ledge stands the devil's chair made of rock. A number of legends have grown up around this devil's foot rock. One story is that he stepped across to Devil's Foot from Connecticut on his way to Westerly. Another is that he came from Massachusetts, having completed the establishment of his kingdom there, and headed for Connecticut to continue his labors. Look out, Jimmy. There are two guesses as to why he passed through Rhode Island so swiftly. One is that he was convinced he couldn't do any proselyting in his state, and the other is that it was his already, so he didn't have to. A third story tells of an Indian squaw who lived in Massachusetts during the early days of the Puritan colony. By some trickery, the devil had persuaded her to forfeit her soul to him. Later she tried to escape Hobomoco, that's what the Native Americans called him, by fleeing into Rhode Island. The devil gave chase, leaving the first, but it was too late for Polly to back out of her bargain, so Poganoog lost its prized beauty.
Couple more stops on our In Dark Places field trip to haunted Rhode Island. The Carriage Inn and Saloon, formerly known as Hoof, Fin, Feathers, was featured on Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters in 2008. The name was changed when the establishment reopened under new ownership in 2013. Haunted Places reported that this location, now a whiskey bar and restaurant, is said to be haunted by a little girl with burn scars and a small boy who implores witnesses to listen to him. Listen to me. Ah! Cold spots, footsteps, and the sound of a child's voice have been detected by both witnesses and paranormal researchers. And then we have the Aldrich Mansion, located on 836 Warwick Neck Avenue, Warwick, Rhode Island. Reportedly haunted by a child who committed suicide by jumping from the balcony, the Aldrich Mansion is one of the top wedding venues in the state. Owned by the Roman Catholic Diocese of Providence since 1939, it is located by Narragansett Bay on picturesque grounds. Not exactly the place you'd think of when it comes to paranormal activity, employees and wedding guests have described ghostly encounters on the property throughout the years, most involving the aforementioned child. You'd think, being owned by the diocese, a cleansing of some sort would have happened at some point. Then again, maybe they don't want to keep it hush-hush. Visit the beautiful property and see for yourself.
The True Story of the Conjuring by Moriah Gill. Thanks, Moriah. Ed and Lorraine Warren had a reputation when it comes to being paranormal investigators. Some hail them as the bravest with the most exciting stories to retell. One being the Amityville horror haunting, Others believe them to be falsifiers making up events for profit. Within the last decade, multiple movies were created centered around their findings and investigations. One of the most widely known is the 2013 release The Conjuring and subsequent films in the Conjuring universe. These include The Conjuring 2, The Conjuring 3, Annabelle Comes Home, and Annabelle Creation. The box office hit focuses on a Rhode Island couple and their 5 daughters being tortured in their haunted house not long after they've moved in. The Perron family's life is the true story of The Conjuring. In 1971, the Perrons, a family of 7, moved into a farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. The 14-room house had been in the same family for about 8 generations before the Perron family moved in. It wasn't long before Carolyn, Roger, Perron, and their girls were experiencing paranormal situations. Like many things, the instances started small. Carolyn Perron would find herself asking small questions such as, "Didn't I leave the broom in this room? What's that noise coming from the other room? I just swept this floor. Where did this dirt pile come from?" The types of things that could happen to any of us. But as the horror film showed, the situation quickly escalated into children being flung from their beds, demonic possession, and calling paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren for their expertise. The family tried to stay out of the way of the ghosts, but that wasn't entirely possible. As it turns out, the house wasn't exactly a hub of clean or positive energy. Remember that family that owned the Perron house prior to the Perrons? It turns out that they had experienced some things too. Multiple members of that family died of mysterious deaths in and near the house. Multiple children died in the creek nearby. Some hung themselves in the attic, and one was murdered. But perhaps the worst part of the house in regards to the Perrons was the spirit of Bathsheba. Bathsheba Sherman was a member of the family who first owned the house and was the leading presence that tormented the Perron family. Further, there was evidence that links Bathsheba to the death of a neighboring child. Bathsheba is buried a short distance from the farmhouse at the downtown Baptist Harryville Cemetery. According to Andrea Perron, the oldest of the Perron children, gave her insight into the situation with Bathsheba. Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position. Andrea claims that her family smelled rotting flesh, saw beds rise, and when her father was forced to go into the basement, a place they believe where the spirits lived, so they generally avoided, he could feel their cold, dark presence. The family asked Ed and Lorraine Warren to conduct a seance, not an exorcism. The Warrens agreed. This led to the frightful demonic possession of Carolyn Perron. Her body being taken over and risen from a chair as she spoke in a language she didn't know. While the children should have been away, Andrea witnessed it. She recounts, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world, and a voice not of her own. Her chair levitated, and she was thrown across the room." Some believe this recount is meant solely to be received as a scary hoopla. Others, however, have seen too much and are true believers. And that's the last stop on our road trip into the unknown of Rhode Island. Hey, you guys, get out of my van. If you've got a story you'd like to add to our little expedition to Rhode Island, or if you know what a hanging Wesley is, send an email to indarkplacespod@hotmail.com. We'll see you again next week. God bless you guys. he used to love watching wrestling. So maybe it's like some kind of a wrestler's finishing move or something. You can hear Jim Ross at the announce table saying, "Oh my goodness, he got him with the hanging Wesley."
A hanging Wesley sounds like a move a ski jumper would do, or a figure skater. Like, holy he's hit the freaking hanging Wesley. The creepiest tale, though, implies that a Bigfoot-like creature the locals call the man monkey roams this road. Who the freak is calling me? Turn my... More than a few Rhode Islanders have sworn... Holy... Ruined everything! Ruined my life! Let me start over again.